Rafael Tavares had been a firefighter for 19 years, and by the summer of 2019, he was the kind of guy everyone in the station respected, but nobody really knew. He kept his head down, did his job, went home. He was 43, divorced for 5 years, and shared custody of his 12-year-old daughter, Sophia, who lived with her mom most of the week. Rafael had this routine, where he'd pick Sophia up every Friday evening, take her for ice cream at that little shop near the park, and they'd spend the weekend together, watching old movies and talking about school. It was the only part of his life that felt solid anymore. The rest was just going through the motions, working double shifts, picking up side gigs, inspecting fire safety systems in fancy condos to keep up with child support, and trying not to think too much about how lonely his apartment felt on the nights Sophia wasn't there. He was tired, bone tired, the kind that sleep doesn't fix. But he showed up every single time, because that's what you do when you've got a kid counting on you and a reputation that says you never quit. That Thursday evening, he was finishing up one of those side gigs at a high-end gated community on the east side of town, the kind of place where every house looked like a damn resort and the security guards wore suits. The condo association had hired him to inspect the fire suppression system in the building next to the mansion district, and he'd been stuck on this narrow technical balcony on the 3rd floor for the past hour, checking sprinkler valves and pressure gauges. It was tedious work, the kind that made his back ache and his mind wander. The balcony was tucked between 2 buildings, a weird architectural leftover that nobody ever used, with a metal railing and a clear view straight into the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the house next door. Some politician's place, he'd heard. Rafael didn't care much about that stuff. Rich people, poor people, they all needed working fire alarms. But as the sun started to set and the lights inside that mansion came on, he found himself glancing over more than once, not out of nosiness, but just because there wasn't much else to look at while he waited for the system pressure to stabilize. He was supposed to be done by 7, and Sophia was expecting his call. He checked his phone, 6:47 p.m. Almost there. That's when he saw them. Through those huge windows, bright as a stage under chandeliers that probably cost more than his truck, a man and a woman were standing in what looked like a living room the size of Rafael's entire apartment. The man was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dark slacks, the kind of outfit that screamed, "I just got back from somewhere important." His hair was perfectly combed, silver at the temples, and even from a distance, Rafael could see the guy had that politician smile. The one that doesn't reach the eyes. He was holding a glass of something amber, whiskey or scotch, and he was talking, gesturing with the glass in big, sweeping motions. The woman was smaller, blonde, wearing a navy blue dress that looked expensive, and she had her arms crossed tight over her chest. Rafael couldn't hear a damn thing through the glass, but he could read body language after 2 decades of emergency calls, and hers was screaming defensive. She was shaking her head, saying something back, and the man's smile was gone now. Rafael looked down at his pressure gauge, tried to mind his own business. Rich people arguing, not his problem. But something in his gut twisted, that old instinct that told him when a scene was about to go bad. He glanced back up, couldn't help it, and now the man was closer to the woman, pointing a finger right in her face. His mouth was moving fast, angry, and the woman took a step back, her hands up like she was trying to calm him down, or maybe protect herself. Rafael couldn't tell which. And then he saw it. The man's free hand came up and cracked across her face, sharp and sudden, and her head snapped to the side. Rafael's stomach dropped. Time did that weird thing it does in emergencies, where everything slows down and speeds up at the same time. He saw her stumble, saw her hand go to her cheek, saw the man turn away like nothing had happened, taking another sip from his glass. And then the guy did something that made Rafael's blood go cold. He bent down, scooped up a little dog that had been sitting on the couch. A tiny thing, maybe a Maltese or a Shih Tzu, white and fluffy. And before Rafael's brain could even process what he was seeing, the man grabbed that dog by the scruff and hurled it across the room like it was a piece of trash. Rafael watched the animal hit the far wall with a sickening thud and crumple to the floor. The woman screamed. He couldn't hear it, but he could see her mouth open wide, see her lunge toward where the dog fell. And the man just stood there, glass in hand, staring at her like he was daring her to do something about it. Raphael's hands were already moving before his brain caught up. 19 years on the job had trained him to react first, think later. He yanked his phone out of his pocket, nearly dropped it because his hands were shaking. Actually shaking, which hadn't happened to him since his first structure fire back in 2000. He fumbled with the screen, pulled up the camera, and started recording. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. Through the lens, he watched the woman, Laura, he'd later learn her name was Laura, crawl across that pristine marble floor toward the dog. The animal wasn't moving. She was crying. He could see her whole body heaving with it, and the man just stood there, swirling his drink, watching her like she was putting on a show for him. Raphael's finger hovered over the red record button, and a voice in his head was screaming at him to stop, to look away, to finish his inspection, and go home and pretend he never saw anything. Because he knew who that guy was now. He'd seen him on billboards all over town. Augusto Noguera. The mayor everyone loved. The guy who cut ribbons at school openings and shook hands at the farmer's market. And Raphael was about to record him committing what looked like assault and animal cruelty in his own damn living room. But he couldn't stop. His thumb pressed record, and he kept the phone steady, angling it to capture everything. The man's face, the woman on the floor, the dog's limp body. His training kicked in. Document the scene, get evidence, make the call. He thought about Sophia, about the custody agreement that was still so fragile his ex-wife's lawyer could rip it apart with one phone call if Raphael gave her any reason to. He thought about his captain, who'd warned him just last month to stop being a hero on off-duty calls because it made the department nervous. He thought about his pension, 15 months away, if he just kept his head down and didn't make waves. And then he thought about that woman's face when her husband hit her, and that little dog hitting the wall, and he realized he'd already made his choice the second he picked up the phone. He was going to finish this recording, and then he was going to call 911, and then he was going to do whatever it took to make sure that piece of garbage in the white shirt answered for what he just did, even if it cost him everything. Because that's what you do when you see someone hurt and you have the power to help. That's what he'd tell Sophia if she ever asked him why he did it. That's what he'd been teaching her since she was old enough to understand. You stand up. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Raphael stopped the recording at 47 seconds. 47 seconds that felt like 20 minutes. And immediately pulled up his contacts, scrolling to the emergency dispatch number he'd had saved since his first year on the job. His finger hovered over the call button for maybe 2 seconds, maybe less. But in that tiny window of time, his entire future flashed in front of him like a highlight reel he didn't want to watch. He saw Sophia's face when he'd have to tell her he couldn't afford to take her to Disney next summer because he lost his pension. He saw his captain's disappointed look when Internal Affairs called him in. He saw his ex-wife's lawyer filing papers to revoke his custody because Mr. Tavares has demonstrated unstable judgment and a pattern of conflict-seeking behavior. All of it, right there, vivid as a nightmare. And then he hit call anyway, because none of that mattered more than the fact that a woman was hurt, and an animal might be dying, and a man who was supposed to lead this city had just shown everyone, or at least shown Raphael, exactly what kind of monster he was behind closed doors. The phone rang twice before a dispatcher picked up, a woman's voice, calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? Raphael's mouth was dry as sandpaper, and for a second he couldn't find the words. He looked back through the window. The woman was kneeling on the floor now, cradling the dog in her arms, rocking back and forth, and the man had disappeared into another room, probably to pour himself another drink. Raphael cleared his throat, forced himself to speak steady, even though his hands were still shaking. Yeah, hi, this is Raphael Tavares. I'm a firefighter with Station 12, badge number 43739. I'm on a service call at the Belmont Heights gated community, and I just witnessed an assault in progress at the residence adjacent to my location. He gave her the address. He'd seen it on the mailbox when he came in. And he told her everything. The slap, the dog, the woman on the floor, the man who he was pretty sure was the mayor. The dispatcher's tone shifted slightly, just a hair, when he said Augusto Nogueira's name, and Rafael caught it immediately. It was the same shift he'd heard 100 times on calls involving someone important. That little pause that meant this just got complicated. She asked him if anyone was in immediate danger, if the suspect was still on scene, if he had visual confirmation of injuries. Rafael answered every question, clinical and precise, the way he'd been trained. But inside, he felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the ground was crumbling under his boots. She told him units were on the way, ETA 8 minutes, and to stay on the line and keep eyes on the scene if it was safe to do so. 8 minutes. Rafael looked at his phone again. 6:54 p.m. Sophia would be calling any minute to say goodnight before bed. He sent her a quick text. "Hey kiddo, running late on a job. Call you in 20. Love you." He didn't know if that was a lie or not. Those 8 minutes stretched out like hours. Rafael stayed on the line with the dispatch, his phone pressed to his ear with one hand, while the other gripped the railing so hard his knuckles went white. Through the window, he watched the woman, Laura, still on the floor with the dog. She was talking to it. He could see her lips moving, probably begging it to wake up, to be okay. The way people do when they can't accept what's right in front of them. The dog's little chest was rising and falling, shallow but steady, and Rafael felt a tiny knot of relief loosen in his gut. At least it was breathing. At least that. The mayor reappeared from what looked like a kitchen or bar area, fresh drink in hand, and he said something to Laura that made her flinch. She didn't look up at him, didn't move, just kept rocking that dog like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. And maybe it was. Rafael had seen that look before, on faces pulled from burning buildings, from car wrecks, from every kind of disaster you could imagine. That 1,000-yard stare that said everything inside you just broke, and you don't know how to put it back together. He wanted to smash through that window, grab that smug bastard by his expensive shirt, and drag him out into the street where everyone could see what he really was. But all he could do was watch and wait and pray the cops got there before the mayor decided to do something worse. At 7:01 p.m., 7 minutes after his call, not 8, Rafael would remember that detail forever. 2 patrol cars rolled up to the mansion's gate. Lights off, no sirens. Smart. Don't spook the suspect. Rafael's dispatcher told him to stay put and stay safe, that officers would contact him shortly for a statement, and then she disconnected. The sudden silence in his ear felt louder than the conversation had been. He watched the cops get buzzed through the gate by security. Another delay, another moment for the mayor to compose himself, to get his story straight, and then they were at the front door. Rafael couldn't see the entrance from where he stood, but he could see into the living room, and he watched Augusto Nogueira straighten his shirt, smooth his hair, and transform his face into something calm and pleasant, like he was about to greet guests at a dinner party, instead of police responding to a domestic violence call. The man set his glass down on a side table, walked over to Laura, and said something that made her go rigid. She looked up at him, and even from a distance, Rafael could see the fear in her eyes. Augusto reached down, Rafael's whole body tensed, ready to scream into the phone he was no longer holding. But the mayor just helped her to her feet, gentle as could be, one hand on her elbow like a concerned husband. The dog was still in her arms, limp and small. And then the front door must have opened, because Augusto turned toward the entryway with a smile that probably looked warm and welcoming if you didn't know what Rafael knew, if you hadn't seen what he'd seen 7 minutes ago. Rafael's stomach turned. He was watching a performance, a mask sliding into place, and he realized with cold certainty that this man had done this before. This wasn't panic. This was practice. Rafael climbed down from the technical balcony as fast as his legs would carry him, his boots clanging against the metal steps loud enough that he worried someone might hear. His inspection equipment was still up there, clipboard, tools, the whole kit, but he didn't care. He needed to get to those cops before they left, before Augusto Nogueira spun whatever story he was about to spin, and sent them on their way with a handshake and a smile. Raphael hit the ground level, rounded the corner of the building, and jogged toward the mansion's front entrance, his heart pounding in his ears. He could see the two officers standing in the doorway now, both young, maybe late 20s, one of them holding a small notepad. The mayor was gesturing as he spoke, animated but not aggressive, probably explaining that this was all a misunderstanding, probably saying his wife had a few too many glasses of wine at dinner and got emotional, probably painting himself as the victim of an overreaction. Raphael had seen it 1,000 times. The way abusers reframe the narrative, make themselves the reasonable one, the calm one, the one who's just trying to keep the peace. And it worked, most of the time, especially when the abuser had money and power and a face everyone recognized from campaign posters. Raphael reached the gate and buzzed the intercom, pressing the button 3 times in quick succession. A security guard's voice crackled through. "Can I help you?" Raphael leaned into the speaker, trying to sound official and urgent without sounding panicked. "Rafael Tavares, firefighter, badge 4739. I'm the one who called this in. I need to speak with the responding officers immediately. I have video evidence of the assault." There was a pause, a long one, and Raphael could practically hear the gears turning in the guard's head. Do I let this guy in and piss off the mayor, or do I keep him out and piss off the cops? The gate buzzed open. Raphael didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed through and walked straight up the driveway, past the sculpted hedges and the fountain that probably cost more than his annual salary, right up to where the officers were standing. One of them turned to look at him, eyebrows raised, and Raphael held up his phone, the video already queued up to play. "I'm the one who called 911, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I witnessed the whole thing from the service balcony next door, and I recorded it. You need to see this before you make any decisions." The mayor's face, oh, Raphael would remember that face forever, went from polite curiosity to something darker, something that looked like recognition and rage all mixed together. Augusto Nogueira knew exactly who Raphael was now, and exactly what he'd just walked into. The older of the two officers, his nameplate read Cortez, took Raphael's phone without a word and pressed play. Raphael watched his face as the video unfolded, watched the subtle shift from skeptical to serious, the way his jaw tightened when Augusto's hand connected with Laura's face, the way his eyes narrowed when the dog hit the wall. The second officer, younger, leaned in to watch over his partner's shoulder, and Raphael heard him mutter something under his breath that sounded like "Jesus Christ." When the video ended, Cortez looked up at Raphael, then at the mayor, then back at Raphael. "This was taken tonight?" he asked. "About 15 minutes ago," Raphael confirmed. "From the service balcony adjacent to this property. I was conducting a fire safety inspection for the condo association." "Tapo?" Cortez nodded slowly, then turned to Augusto Nogueira, and Raphael saw the shift in his posture, the way a cop's body language changes when they go from taking a report to conducting an investigation. "Mr. Mayor, I'm going to need to speak with your wife privately, and we'll need to examine the animal to assess its injuries." Augusto's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold, the kind of cold that made Raphael's skin crawl. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding," the mayor said, his voice smooth as glass. "My wife and I had a disagreement, nothing more. The dog is fine. This gentleman," he gestured dismissively at Raphael, "seems to have misinterpreted what he saw." Cortez didn't blink. "Sir, I have video evidence of an assault and possible animal cruelty. This isn't a misunderstanding. I need to speak with Mrs. Nogueira now." For the first time that night, Raphael saw something crack in Augusto's composure. Just a flicker, a tiny fracture in the mask, and then it was gone, replaced by something harder, more calculating. The mayor pulled out his phone, and Raphael knew exactly what was about to happen. Augusto was calling someone, probably his lawyer, maybe the police chief, maybe both. Within minutes, this whole scene was going to get a lot more complicated, and Raphael was going to be standing in the middle of it with nothing but a 47-second video and his badge number. Laura appeared in the doorway behind her husband, the dog still cradled in her arms, and her eyes met Raphael's across the foyer. There was something in that look. Gratitude, maybe. or terror, or both, that told him she knew he'd seen everything, that someone finally knew the truth about what happened behind these walls. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but Augusto turned and put his hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm, and whatever words she'd been about to speak died in her throat. Officer Cortez stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me, please. We need to take a statement and get you and the animal checked out by medical personnel." Laura looked at her husband, then at the officer, then at Raphael, and in that moment he saw her make a choice, saw her spine straighten just a little. She nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." And Raphael realized he'd been holding his breath. The next hour was a blur of procedure and paperwork. Officer Cortez took Raphael's statement in the back of the patrol car, while his partner escorted Laura and the dog to an ambulance that had been called to the scene. Raphael gave him everything: his name, badge number, the exact timeline of events, a detailed description of what he'd witnessed, and a copy of the video file transferred directly to Cortez's phone. The officer was professional, thorough, asked all the right questions, and didn't once suggest that Raphael had overstepped or misunderstood what he'd seen. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't, because Raphael could see Augusto Noguera standing on his front lawn 20 feet away, phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. The mayor kept glancing over at the patrol car, and every time their eyes met, Raphael felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. By the time Raphael finished his statement, 3 more vehicles had pulled up to the scene. An unmarked sedan that Raphael recognized as belonging to a detective from the local precinct, a black SUV with tinted windows that screamed, "Lawyer!" and a news van from the town's biggest TV station. Word was spreading fast. Too fast. Raphael watched as Augusto Noguera shook hands with the man who'd stepped out of the SUV. Definitely a lawyer. Expensive suit, briefcase, the whole 9 yards, and then both of them walked over to the detective. They talked for maybe 5 minutes, close together, voices low, and Raphael couldn't hear a word, but he could read the body language clear as day. Damage control. Officer Cortez handed Raphael a business card with a case number written on the back. "We're going to need you to come down to the station tomorrow morning to give a formal deposition," he said. "Bring the original video file on whatever device you recorded it on. Don't delete anything. Don't edit anything. Just bring it as is." Raphael nodded, pocketing the card. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked, gesturing toward the ambulance where Laura sat with a blanket around her shoulders, a paramedic checking her vitals, while another examined the dog on a gurney beside her. Cortez followed his gaze. "We're taking her to the hospital for a full medical evaluation, and the dog's going to the emergency vet clinic. She'll have the option to file charges, and with your video, the DA's office might pursue this even if she doesn't. Animal cruelty is a separate charge that doesn't require her cooperation." He paused, then added quieter. "You did the right thing calling this in. I know it's complicated, given who he is, but you did the right thing." Raphael wanted to believe that. He wanted to feel good about what he'd done. Feel like a hero, feel like he'd made a difference. But all he felt was a gnawing dread in his gut, the kind that told him the hardest part was still ahead. As he walked back to his truck, he passed the news van, and a reporter with a microphone called out to him. "Sir, were you the one who witnessed the incident? Can we get a statement?" Raphael kept walking, head down, jaw clenched. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from his captain. "Call me, now." It was 8:23 p.m. He'd missed Sophia's bedtime call. Raphael sat in his truck in the parking lot of a gas station 3 blocks from the mansion, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone numb. He stared at his captain's text for a solid minute before he worked up the nerve to call back. Captain Morrison picked up on the first ring. "Tavares." "Whoa, what the hell did you just step in?" His voice wasn't angry, not exactly, but it had that edge that meant Raphael was about to get a lecture he didn't want to hear. Raphael took a breath, tried to keep his voice level. "I witnessed a domestic assault during a routine inspection call, Cap. I called it in, gave a statement to the responding officers, and provided video evidence. That's it. I followed protocol. There was a long pause on the other end, long enough that Raphael thought maybe the call had dropped, and then Morrison sighed, the kind of sigh that carried 20 years of dealing with department politics and bullshit. Tavares, do you have any idea who Augusto Noguera is? Do you understand the position you just put this department in? Raphael's jaw clenched. With all due respect, sir, I don't care who he is. I saw a woman get hit and a dog get thrown against a wall. I did my job. So, another pause. Your job is fire safety inspection, not playing detective. You should have called it in and walked away, not inserted yourself into the middle of a high-profile domestic situation with video evidence that's probably going to end up on every news channel in the state by morning. Raphael felt heat rise in his chest, anger mixing with exhaustion and fear. So what are you saying, Cap? That I should have looked the other way because the guy's important? Because he's the mayor. Morrison's voice softened, just a fraction. I'm saying you need to be prepared for what's coming. The mayor's office has already reached out to the chief. There are going to be questions about why you were on that balcony, whether you had authorization to record, whether you violated any privacy laws or department policies. They're going to try to discredit you, and they're going to dig into every aspect of your life to find something they can use. I'm not saying you did the wrong thing, Raphael. I'm saying you need to lawyer up, keep your head down, and be ready for a fight. Raphael leaned his head back against the seat, closed his eyes. He thought about Sophia, about the custody hearing that was still pending from last year, about how his ex-wife's lawyer would love to get wind of this and paint him as unstable, as someone who goes looking for trouble. He thought about his pension, about the mortgage on his apartment, about the fact that he was one bad decision away from losing everything he'd worked for. And then he thought about Laura's face, about the way she'd looked at him with those eyes that said, "Please, someone, anyone, see me." "I'll get a lawyer," Raphael said quietly. "But I'm not taking back my statement, and I'm not deleting that video. If they want to come after me, let them come." Morrison was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been respect, or maybe just resignation. "All right, Tavares. Come in tomorrow for your shift. Keep your mouth shut around the station, and don't talk to any reporters. We'll figure this out." The line went dead. Raphael sat there in the dark, phone in his lap, and finally let himself feel the full weight of what he'd just done. He called Sophia at 8:37 p.m. She answered on the third ring, her voice sleepy and a little annoyed. "Dad, where were you? You said you'd call at 7:30. Yes, Raphael closed his eyes, pressed his forehead against the steering wheel, and tried to keep his voice normal, tried to sound like everything was fine, like he hadn't just blown up his entire life in the span of an hour. "I know, kiddo. I'm sorry. Work ran late, but I'm calling now, aren't I?" She sighed, that dramatic 12-year-old sigh that said he was on thin ice, but she'd forgive him this time. They talked for 15 minutes about nothing important. Her math test, the new girl in her class who was actually pretty cool, the movie she wanted to see this weekend when she came over. Raphael listened to every word like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard, because right then, it was. This was normal. This was his daughter, his reason for getting up every morning, his reminder that there was something good and pure in the world that he hadn't screwed up yet. When she said goodnight and told him she loved him, his throat went tight, and he had to wait a second before he could say it back. "Love you too, Soph. See you Friday." The line went dead, and the silence that followed felt like falling. Raphael drove home on autopilot, his mind replaying the night in fractured pieces. Laura's face, the dog hitting the wall, Augusto's cold smile, his captain's warning, Sophia's voice. By the time he pulled into his apartment complex, it was past 9, and his phone had 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. Most were from numbers he didn't recognize, probably reporters who'd gotten his contact info from God knows where. 3 were from co-workers at the station, all variations of "Dude, what the hell happened?" and "You good?" One was from his ex-wife, Mariana. "I just saw the news. We need to talk about Sophia's custody arrangement. Call me tomorrow." His stomach dropped. The news. He pulled up a local news website on his phone, and there it was, top story, complete with a photo of him standing next to the patrol car at the mayor's mansion. Local firefighter alleges assault by Mayor Noguera. Video evidence submitted to police. The article was short, vague on details, because the investigation was ongoing, but it was enough. His name was out there now. His face, his badge number, everything. The comment section was already a war zone. Half the people calling him a hero, half calling him a liar, trying to take down a good man for attention or a payout. Raphael turned off his phone, stuffed it in his glove compartment, and sat in the dark parking lot staring at the dashboard. Tomorrow he'd get a lawyer. Tomorrow he'd give his deposition. Tomorrow he'd face whatever shitstorm was coming. But tonight, right now, all he could do was sit there and wonder if he'd just saved a woman's life or destroyed his own. Raphael didn't sleep that night. He tried, laid in bed staring at the ceiling until 3 in the morning. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Laura's face, or heard his captain's warning, or imagined Sophia reading some headline that painted her dad as either a hero or a troublemaker, depending on which side of the political fence you sat on. He got up, made coffee he didn't drink, paced his apartment like a caged animal, and finally sat on his couch with his laptop open to read every article, every comment, every single word people were saying about what happened. The internet was vicious. For every person who called him brave, there were 2 calling him an opportunist, a liar, someone with an axe to grind against the mayor for some invented reason. One commenter claimed Raphael had been fired from a previous job for insubordination. Completely false. He'd never been fired from anything in his life. But the lie was out there now, spreading like wildfire, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Another said he was probably trying to get a book deal, or a movie made about his heroic actions. The word heroic was in quotes, dripping with sarcasm. By 4 a.m., Raphael closed the laptop, deleted his social media apps from his phone, and promised himself he wouldn't look again. That promise lasted about 6 hours. Friday morning came too fast. Raphael showed up to the station at 7 sharp, showered and in his uniform, trying to project normalcy, even though he felt like he was walking into enemy territory. The guys were already there. Some of them gave him supportive nods, a couple clapped him on the shoulder and muttered, "Good job," or "You did the right thing." But most of them avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in their boots or their coffee, or literally anything that wasn't Rafael Tavares. He got it. Nobody wanted to be associated with the guy who might be radioactive, who might bring heat down on the whole department. Captain Morrison called him into his office before roll call, closed the door, and handed him a business card for a lawyer named Patricia Chen, who specialized in whistleblower cases and law enforcement issues. "She's good," Morrison said. "Used her myself a few years back when the city tried to screw me on a workers' comp claim. Tell her I sent you. She'll take your case." Raphael pocketed the card, mumbled a thank you, and tried to read Morrison's face for any hint of what the captain really thought. Was he proud? Disappointed? Angry? But Morrison's expression was neutral, professional, impossible to crack. "Your deposition is at 11, Morrison added. "Take the rest of the morning off, get your head straight, and don't say anything to anyone without that lawyer present. Understood?" Raphael nodded. "Yes, sir." And then he left the office and got back in his truck and drove straight to Patricia Chen's firm, because waiting until Monday felt like suicide. Patricia Chen was 40-something, sharp-eyed, with gray streaks in her black hair that she wore pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Her office was small but organized, every surface covered in case files and law books, and she listened to Raphael's story without interrupting once, taking notes in neat handwriting on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, when he'd walked her through the whole night from start to finish, shown her the video, handed over copies of every text and email and news article, she sat back in her chair, tapped her pen against her lips and gave him a look that was equal parts impressed and concerned. "Mr. Tavares, you're in a very unique position here," she said finally. "You're not technically a whistleblower in the traditional sense because you're not reporting misconduct within your own organization. But you are a public employee who witnessed a crime and reported it, which gives you certain protections under state law. The problem is that Mayor Nogueira is going to come at you hard, and he has resources you don't. Legal teams, political connections, media influence. They're going to try to paint you as someone with an agenda, someone unreliable, someone who violated his privacy, or exceeded your authority as a firefighter. Your video is solid evidence, but they'll argue it was obtained illegally, that you had no right to be recording from that balcony." Raphael's stomach sank. "But I was there legally. I was doing my job." Chen nodded. "I know, and we'll argue that. But you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Custody battles, financial audits, character assassination, all of it. Are you ready for that?" Raphael thought about Sophia. He thought about his apartment, his pension, the 19 years he'd put into a job he loved. He thought about waking up every morning for the rest of his life, knowing he'd looked the other way when someone needed help. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "I'm ready." Chen smiled, just a little. "Good, then let's get to work." They spent the next 2 hours going over strategy, how to handle the deposition, what questions to expect, what traps to avoid. Chen made it clear that the DA's office was interested in prosecuting based on the video evidence, but they needed Raphael's testimony to be airtight. Any inconsistency, any wobble in his story, and the mayor's lawyers would tear him apart on the stand. By the time Raphael left her office at 10:47 a.m., 13 minutes before his deposition, he felt slightly more prepared, but no less terrified. Chen walked him to the door, handed him her card, and said something that stuck with him. "The truth is a powerful thing, Mr. Tavares. It doesn't always win, but it's always worth fighting for." Raphael nodded, shook her hand, and headed to the police station to give his formal statement. His phone, still turned off in his glove compartment, had 43 new messages waiting. He didn't check a single one. The deposition room at the police station smelled like stale coffee and old paper. The kind of place where Raphael had given statements 100 times before, but never felt this exposed. 2 detectives sat across from him, one with a recorder running, the other with a notepad, and Patricia Chen was right beside him. Her presence a quiet anchor in the storm. They started easy. Name, rank, badge number, what he was doing on that balcony at 6:47 p.m. Thursday evening. But Raphael could feel the shift coming, the way their questions started circling like sharks. "Mr. Tavares, did you have explicit permission to record private individuals from private property?" one detective asked, his tone neutral but pointed. Chen leaned forward before Raphael could answer. "My client was conducting a legitimate fire safety inspection on public access technical property. He witnessed a crime in progress and documented it per standard first responder protocol. Objection noted for the record." Raphael stuck to the facts, replayed the video 3 times on request, described every detail. The slap's sound he imagined through the glass, the dog's limp flop, Augusto's casual sip afterward, like he was reliving it all over again. His voice didn't shake, but inside he was screaming, wondering if every word was digging his grave deeper. By noon, they wrapped up, and Chen pulled him aside in the hallway. "You did great, solid, consistent. The video speaks for itself." But as they walked out, Raphael saw a cluster of reporters across the street, cameras ready, and he knew the real deposition was just beginning, the one in the court of public opinion. Lunch was a protein bar in Chen's car as they drove back to her office, because Raphael couldn't stomach anything heavier. His phone was blowing up again. Sophia had texted 3 times asking if he was okay. His ex-wife had left a voicemail that sounded more worried than angry, and there was a new message from an unknown number. "Stay strong, Laura." His heart skipped. He showed it to Chen, who nodded approvingly. "That's good. Shows she's cooperating." But then came the bad news. She'd gotten a call from the DA's office. The mayor's legal team had filed a motion to suppress the video, claiming invasion of privacy and illegal surveillance, and they'd subpoenaed Raphael's personnel file, custody records, even his financials, looking for any hint of motive or instability. Chen's face hardened. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. But we've got protections. Public employee whistleblower statutes, first responder immunity for crime reporting. We'll fight it. Raphael stared out the window at the passing streets, the normal Friday traffic that felt a million miles from his life now. He thought about picking up Sophia later, about explaining this mess to a 12-year-old without scaring her, about whether he'd still have a job next week. What if I lose everything? He asked quietly. Chen glanced over. You won't. Not if we play this right. But you need to brace for the hits. This guy's machine is just warming up. They pulled into her parking lot at 12:42 p.m., and Raphael felt the weight settle heavier on his shoulders, the day's tension coiling tighter as the real battle loomed. The rest of Friday blurred into a nightmare of meetings and phone calls. After leaving Chen's office, Raphael picked up Sophia from school at 3:15 p.m. sharp, determined to give her the normal weekend they'd planned despite the chaos swirling around him. She climbed into the truck with her backpack stuffed with homework, and that bright smile that always made his chest ache with love, chattering about her day before she noticed the shadows under his eyes. Dad, you look tired. Is everything okay? He forced a grin, ruffled her hair. Just a long week at work, kiddo. But we're doing ice cream now, right? They went to their spot, the little shop with the sticky tables, and the owner who remembered Sophia's favorite, strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. And for 30 glorious minutes, Raphael forgot about mayors and depositions and lawyers. Sophia licked her cone, talked about wanting to be a vet when she grew up because she loved animals so much. And Raphael's throat tightened, thinking about that little dog crumpling against the wall. He hugged her a little too tight when they left, promised her movie night with pizza, and drove her home to Mariana's at 6, where his ex-wife was waiting on the porch with arms crossed and a face like thunder. We need to talk, she said as Sophia ran inside. Raphael braced himself. Not now. Not in front of her. Mariana's eyes flashed. This custody thing. It's not stable if you're going to be on every news channel fighting the mayor. Think about Sophia. He nodded, exhausted. I am thinking about her. That's why I can't back down. She shook her head, slammed the door. Raphael drove away, feeling like the ground was shifting under him again. Saturday morning brought the backlash. Raphael woke to his phone, finally turned back on, exploding with notifications. The local paper had run a hit piece. Firefighter's credibility questioned in mayor assault claim, complete with anonymous sources from City Hall, claiming Raphael had a history of disciplinary issues and questionable judgment on calls. Lies, all of it. His record was spotless, but the damage was done. By 9 a.m., his station group chat was silent, no one inviting him to the usual post-shift beers. Then Chen called. The mayor's team had leaked his custody battle details to a blogger, painting him as an unfit father seeking revenge through false accusations. Raphael's hands shook as he read the post, saw his dirty laundry aired for the world. Arguments with Mariana, missed pickups from last year. Nothing criminal, but personal enough to hurt. He wanted to punch something, scream, drive to City Hall and demand answers, but Chen's voice cut through. Don't react. We file defamation tomorrow. Focus on the truth. He spent the day barricaded in his apartment, blinds drawn, fielding calls from reporters he hung up on, ignoring knocks from neighbors who'd seen his face on TV. Sophia texted at noon. Saw you on the news, Dad? Mom's mad, but I love you. Be safe. Tears stung his eyes. By evening, another call from Chen. The DA had the vet report. The dog would survive with a concussion and broken ribs, and Laura had given a full statement corroborating the video. Small victories, but the pressure was building, and Raphael wondered how much more he could take before something broke. Over the next few months, Raphael lived in a haze of hearings, legal battles, and public scrutiny. The mayor's office fought tooth and nail to suppress the video and discredit him. But with Patricia Chen's fierce defense and Laura's courageous statements, the truth slowly began to break through the veneer of corruption and intimidation. The local press, initially polarized, started running longer reports on the investigation, uncovering more about Augusto Nogueira's abuses of power hidden beneath the polished public image. Rafael's own department faced pressure to distance themselves, but thanks to whistleblower protections under the law, he held his position. He lost some friends along the way. The gossip and political whispers made sure of that. But he gained something far more valuable: a voice. Laura filed for divorce, and while the legal process was messy, she and the dog eventually found a safe place with the help of local charities and advocates. The dog, a little white fluff ball named Pipoca, recovered from his injuries and became a symbol of resilience within the community. Rafael took every weekend he could to visit them, forging a quiet friendship with Laura based on mutual respect and shared trauma. The city council launched an independent investigation into Mayor Nogueira's conduct, resulting in his resignation and criminal charges. No one said it was easy. The price was high, and Rafael knew scars remained, both visible and hidden. Through it all, Rafael's relationship with Sofia was his anchor. Custody battles became another front, but Mariana eventually conceded, seeing how fiercely he fought not just for justice, but for their daughter's future. Rafael started attending therapy to deal with the fatigue, stress, and the shadow of doubt that sometimes crept in. He learned to open up about the night that changed everything, how a single moment of courage could ripple through lives in ways unforeseen. He never forgot the weight of that 47-second video clip, how it held a universe of pain and hope within. Years later, Rafael would sometimes think back to that night on the technical balcony, the fog of fear and resolve that surrounded every breath, every decision. His story became one shared in forums and support groups for whistleblowers and domestic violence survivors, a reminder that standing up for what's right often means standing alone at first, but it also means the possibility of change, no matter how big the machine you're up against. Rafael's life was never the same after, but neither was the city's. The bravery of one firefighter had shattered the silence in a place that thought itself untouchable, had sparked conversations about abuse, power, and the necessity of speaking out. Some days the fight felt endless, but Rafael knew, deep down, that silence was never an option. There was too much at stake, too many lives depending on someone having the courage to say no more. And Rafael had said it, loud and clear.